Just make an introduction here. Just a minute. Chicky walk. Bit of chicky in this one. Hi, everyone. My name is Paul Kyle, and I'd like to welcome everybody to this very, very special event. I've had the privilege of getting to know Thom over, I guess, the last several years. Thom and his wife Blythe came up for their dear friend Tony Robbins exhibition we held here about 5 years ago now. And that's when I first got to meet Thom. And not really knowing what a rock star he was. So, it was nice because I wasn't intimidated at all. And I could just, but now I am, absolutely. Over these last few days, we've shared the most rich time together. And having gotten to know Thom and the body of his architectural work more than I was familiar with before this. And I'm just so humbled, so blown away. This man is an artist first and foremost. That's what he is. And his architecture is his medium of his art. And one of the things I've been so incredibly impressed with is Thom, throughout his career, has been always at the forefront of what's available to him to use technologically and in every other way. And, he's one of the few people of our kind of vintage that is right up with that stuff. And, the result is this work. And, I don't think I have to tell you people his long list of achievements in his career. It's just incredible. There's not much, I can say. Thom we're just so lucky and privileged to have him here. And Thom, thank you so much for doing this. So without further ado, I'm just going to pass the mic over to you.
I won't be able to take much more of that. So. Like all of you in this room, I wake up in the morning and try to get to work around 8 o'clock, and I kind of do it day after day, and I'm just asking questions of what it means to do whatever I'm doing at the time. This is not a lecture, it's just a conversation. My sense in situations like this, where I'm showing my work, is that I've said everything I have to say is on the walls, but that probably kind of won't work at this time. You expect me to say something. And I'm convinced that it's difficult, if not impossible, to ever explain a piece of art, because it operates within its own terms of communication that we struggle to define within conventional language, etc. And it's precisely that the way it speaks to you that is unique to any art form, whether it's within the terms of music or theater or poetry or architecture or plastic arts. What I'm going to try to do is just explain the terms of kind of interests I have that led me to the work in front of you at this point in time. And I myself couldn't really explain to you where it comes from literally. I have no idea. It just takes place over a very long period of time, and it had to do with certain issues that were in front of me at the time. And in this case, as an architect. But what I've decided to focus on here, and I'm going to start it in a kind of very, very light way, and it's just going to be a kind of a chat. Starting in mid-90s, my profession as an architect, the discipline of architecture, shifted quite radically in terms of method. And I was very influenced right out of school. I was a character that was interested in methodology and in what you call operational strategy, the method of producing the work as the thing that you're looking at and not the work, right? And then what happened in the middle of the 90s, the digital world comes along, and it challenged the way I was trained. And I was trained with the hand. And I was evaluated with the hand. And I'll never forget meeting certain people. They were kind of very tough characters in the academic world. And they would look at you, and if you didn't have a certain talent, you were already done. It was just like this, right? And the formal language and the method of getting there was enormously kind of shifted, and no longer do we have the kind of these simple tools we use, that we had this very different way of kind of approaching it. And it became apparent to me, because at that time there was a disagreement among architects. I'm talking about the mid-90s, and I remember talking about a friend of mine, Stephen Hall. We'd go back and forth, and he was claiming that architecture would be over once that he didn't have this, and that he was convincing me that I couldn't go in this direction. I'm going, I don't think so. I think we're looking at something that, I'm just sniffing, I have no clue, that I think we're looking at a very phenomenon that's taking place that's going to change not only architecture, but we're changing the way we think, and as an augmentation. So I was going to start with this image where I'm working now as a cyborg, and I understand that, right? And as a cyborg, most of you are already by definition cyborgs if you wear glasses, literally if you have a mechanical assistance, right, that I'm understanding. That out of this process that started again with the digital in my world, that I'm now operating, and the things that I'm producing or my creative structure, my creative energy, my focus on thinking in a way that's challenging or unraveling complex, intricate problems, is now augmented between the mechanical, the digital world, and the biological. And after that, it's a complicated, the degree of that or whatever is a whole other conversation. But these pieces are going to have to do with that, because I produce the thinking that goes into the piece and not the piece. Right? And then with that, there were some things I realized that, which one do I push? Okay. I'm going to show you just a few images, because I came out of school in the, Tony, we've been going back and forth on this. I came out of school in the late 60s, and I'm starting my thinking and my discipline in the early 70s. And painting was over. And there was a whole new thinking. And it's going to immediately trace back to the beginning of the century, and I'm just looking at the dates now and going, wow, it's not 100 years, it's actually 111 years in terms of 1913, and Duchamp's stoppages. And of course, I could have showed the urinal or whatever, but there's a shift that's already beginning to question the notion of facility as the basis of art, and it's moving to a much more intellectual, cerebral place, and we now invent what we call art. And of course it was a Renaissance moment that changed the whole notion of what it means to be an artist, right? That we're still working with, right? That you could say was in some ways oh, wait a minute. Oh, I thought I moved it. Oh, I'm sorry. Whoop. That you could say was in one of the 20th century projects had to do with this redefinition. And then with that came his interest in chance behavior. And then immediately, and at the same time, with ARP, and there's a conversation here between Richter and ARP, who came up with the idea, but ARP is tearing up a drawing and dropping it on the floor and now claiming that the piece on the floor, well, Richter says it's his idea, but whatever, that this is the piece of work. This is 1913. I think it is, 1912, right? I'm born in 1944, so this has been going on for a while, right? And it's a kind of a radical idea, right? In terms of we're looking at this, and this is one of the most vibrant ideas of the nature of what an artistic activity is and kind of what it means. And it's impossible not to be aware of this, right, in terms of your own educational process. And then with that, with chance behavior, and again, I just instinctively was interested in randomness somewhere early on, and I have no idea where it came from. It just was intuitive. And again, we look at the early work, and there was a whole notion of these anti-form characters. That Sarah's early work, there were these scraps of things. And again, these were some of the most interesting artistic activities taking place at this particular time. And I'm just this young kid coming out of school, and I'm looking at this, and I'm trying to process it, because like most people, I'm still fairly naively notion of a painting is still figurative, even more or less. Well, maybe not, but it's still somewhat conventional. And I'm scratching my head, and then of course something much more kind of literal shows up. with Pollock, and it happens to be coincidentally the 4 pieces, 2 paintings and 2 paintings that were thrown are at the Guggenheim in Venice, and it's 1944. So I'm born in 1944, and this guy has decided not to touch the easel, and then very quickly he gets rid of the easel, and that's like again a phenomenal thing. It's no longer vertical; it's horizontal, right? And you're no longer an easel painter, right? And you're painting on the floor, and it's filled with the spontaneous act, etc. And again, part of the process is starting with Duchamp. There's this lineage that's going straight through. You could go right through back to art. We could name all kinds of characters that are kind of part of this. Well, then maybe more importantly, as an architect, I am fascinated at the time with a guy named James Sterling, and he's an additive mechanical character that came out of the work as you could say late 19th century, actually. But it's kind of objects and highly articulated things that kind of sit on the ground. And I'm fascinated with him, and I'm heading to England to look at all of his work, and it's having a huge influence on what I think I'm going to be as an architect. But then right after that, I'm aware of Heiser. Well, along with this conversation of where art was, they're leaving their studios. Painting's over. It's absolutely done, right? And the Smithsons, the Christos, et cetera, are all heading in the Turrells in the future and digging. And I remember seeing this, and it totally changed my notion of architecture. And it had a huge effect that I'm still working on. I'll show you one little piece of work that we're digging, and it's the antithesis of Mr. Sterling building stuff. He's actually carving the ground. He's shaping the ground, and it's a carving act. And again, at that point, I'm connecting Corbusier and Mies and some of the major 20th century architects. And where Corbusier, you can very articulate subtraction and addition. And I'm kind of interested in his notion of subtraction. So there is kind of links as an architect in terms of what this character is doing in terms of subtracting and digging. But it's going to really affect me. And then it's going to be years before architects that I understand that this is going to lead to a much broader notion of now a broader idea of environment and a global sustainable. It's going to connect to a scientific set of ideas as you now kind of reconstruct building an earth. And what's going to take place over the next, for me, 30 years is going to go from Corbusier and object and Platonic landscape to this. It's going to connect, right? And it's going to, the 21st century architecture is going to look considerably different. It's going to move, and you'll understand a very radically different notion of the relationship of how we kind of operate within a natural landscape within a global kind of context. And then this is going to become, with many kind of artists, I'm in Vienna, I forget the name of the woman right now, but we had a show there, and I was completely taken away. I say, okay, I get it. You're starting to make relationships with people and connecting with people. And I'm going, well, I wanted to do that. You beat me to it. This is a really beautiful piece of work, and nature is taking over architecture. Really a powerful statement, right? It's now going to be, and of course, working in Vienna, perfect place because you have history and the weight and the importance of history that you're working with, right? You couldn't do this in LA or in this city. It'd have less meaning than it would that was in the Angewandte, that's in the museum. And then, of course, I'm being reminded, like ARP in the art world, I'm being reminded in architecture of people like Switters in Merzbau, that of the extreme potential of architecture as an art form, and the connection between the arts. So when we talk about painting and sculpture and architecture, there's not such a huge division. And I immediately was interested in that the relationship between the various forms of your creative act, right? And whether you called it painting or sculpture or architecture, became something that's kind of rattling around, and with a group of us at the time. And then I'm drawing, And I came out of this, architecture was dead when I went to school, and they were dangerous, and it was Berkeley and a series of characters, and it was highly scientific, and I did all kinds of quasi-scientific kind of studies, and they suppressed anything intuitive, and they suppressed anything traditionally kind of, quote, artistic, quotes. And I'm coming out of school, and I'm realizing that I had kind of, it didn't fit me, and I'm trying to reestablish who I am, and I'm drawing. And again, as in architecture, I assume some of you are architects here, it's a complicated profession to get started in if you're interested in the culture of architecture primarily, and not in the more pragmatic, service-oriented part of the architecture. But you can express your ideas through drawings and models and ideas, and actually develop some sense of kind of who you are that allows you to kind of proceed in the discipline that'll sooner or later take you into construction. And I was aware of that, and the drawings were clearly projects because I was aware that they were absolutely connected to my output as an architect in terms of how I was understood and what I was interested in. And at the same time, because I'm trying to survive and I'm selling, the drawings are actually my livelihood at the same time. It became very clear that they were autonomous, that the drawings were both autonomous and had their own world, and they were directly connected to a process of making work. And they went back and forth in that sense, and sometimes they moved more towards the conceptual and the autonomous, and sometimes they were related, like in the case of the one on the right of the building, to the tectonic, and they're still very kind of architectural in their interest. And then certain things happened with this merging. We produced it. It's going to connect to this piece on this wall, the black one, the strange networks. We're drawing, and the drawings are becoming more three-dimensional. And I'm an architect, and I'm interested in spatial conditions, and so I'm producing drawings that are now have a thickness and a literal material, and then some of them are purposely more painterly, etc. And I'm interested in the vagueness between model and drawing, and we called them dwaddles. I took that from Coy Howard, actually. There's a group of us, by the way. There's 5 of us or so in LA now that are kind of talking to each other, and we're all teaching. And this conversation we're having every other day in juries, where we can finish each other's sentences, and we're all kind of fighting it out and finding our own little directions. But the models are now, again, the one in the middle, I'm with Heiser, and I'm digging, and I'm carving, and I'm giving rhythm to a site, and I'm giving an organization to the site. And then with that, I'm interested in organizational ideas, and it has to do with multiple systems that make up an idea, and I'm challenging classical architecture that starts with Palladio. There's no such thing as a single system, right? And we're starting to just about ready to get rid of the Cartesian kind of world, but this is going to come right after this. And then the computer shows up, and I'm not sure what you call these things. They're really not drawings. They're images of things that you produce that are drawing-like, I guess, right? But several things are taking place. One, we're radically expanding language. And the Cartesian, 89 degrees now equals 90. It's irrelevant, right? And then the curve, architecture is a little kind of late to come to this, is a toaster. You could kind of name common items that had curves on them, right? And architects are still kind of really stuck with these kind of simple geometries. And we're now making kind of associations of things, and the whole idea of organization is shifting radically, right? But I'm interested in not in any way chaos. They're going to be organized, but we're challenging the notion of what it means to be organized, going way back to ARP and dropping stuff, right? But they were kind of a little too loose. That's another side. I want a little more discipline in terms of kind of we can understand it. Like when you walk around the room, for me, the first thing would be, are they not chaotic? Are they coherent? And if you don't understand the nature of the coherency, that's no problem. That just means that would be true for any a natural phenomena. You would say the same thing. You could walk through a forest, or you could look at a human body, or et cetera, and it doesn't mean you understand it, but it's coherent, right? But it operates under multiple systems, not a single system. And I'm involved at that. And all of a sudden it has, the drawing, you're seeing this moving, it's a CAT scan. It's not a drawing anymore. It's not a section, and the section isn't developing the building. It's an analysis of the thing you develop. So it's a complete, and it's free. You set it up on a computer at a meter, and you can look at 100 of them. And now you decide, why am I drawing the section? And you're like the medical profession, you've decided there's a reason to look at something in a certain way that gives you certain information, right? And that's why you produce the piece of work. But it has nothing to do, and again, I'm trained a planometric, building starts with a plan. And it immediately goes to section, and I happen to be a person that was interested in the section, was spatial, so I was known for somebody that drew all these sections constantly looking at the spatial thing. And then with that, in the traditional system, an architect had the total thing in your head, because there's an abstract, many plans and many sections, and you were the one that had the thing. And I remember when I was starting to practice and I'm working with clients, it kind of shocked me that I'd be talking to somebody that seemed to be kind of normally intelligent, and I'd look at a very simple plan and they had no idea what they're looking at. And I'd go, damn, what's going on here? And I forgot, I took it for granted that these are abstract things, right? That everybody isn't, and then a section, of course, it's just about rare to find anybody that actually understands a section, much less a kind of complex one. They're abstracts, and it was your job as an architect, you had the thing in your brain. Well, now it's very different, that you're showing something that's synthesized, and it's very literal. And then things are happening that are, because this is new to me. This is showing up, and I'm just looking at it and asking myself, what have I got here, and what does this mean? And it has qualities that are now translucent, transparent, that had nothing to do with the way I was drawing, with lines. But they're actually really connected to the work, right? So it's taking me a completely different place and making me ask very, very different questions. And then something happens that's huge. I can crawl in them. Couldn't have ever done that. I could take this abstract thing and I can work with concepts and now turn it into perception and look at what I've designed and decide, and I can show it to the outside world, and they can have some idea of where the hell we're going with this project. And again, this is going to be an enormous change, and this is taking place in 2 years. Literally, this is ching-ching. It's moving that quickly, right? And then a shift now. It was the lecture 2 days ago with architecture. I'm starting a practice. I'm starting at the level of institutional and larger scale buildings, and it took me 20 years to get to that place, and I'm going to suppress the drawings. I'm going to still be interested in drawing, but I'm not communicating it, and I'm interested in making work, and the drawings are now a hang-up because I spent 20 years showing people work, and they say, oh, you're not really an architect, you just draw. Okay, all right, and that was 20 years. And then so finally you get the work and you focus on the work. And then 4 or 5 years ago, I'm interested in starting to shift kind of where we're going organizationally again. And I start producing a series of, and I'm, again, in my academic work, I have students that are connecting to interests that we have. And I'm invited to a jury, and he was looking at a drawing. It was a 6th Street drawings. And I get invited to a jury for somebody that was looking at these drawings we did, 30 years ago. And he wanted me to be on the jury, and I came. And he was a really interesting guy, and I hired him. And then we said, kind of a good time to kind of do some research again. And I've kind of practiced now for whatever, like the last 20 years. And I brought him on, and we worked just on these conceptual projects, and they're about organization. I'm an architect still, right? And I'm taking 4 primitives and putting them together within a system, and I'm trying to see how many radically different solutions I can get where I'm controlling the DNA matter, and it's a XY line, a Z line, an object, and a surface. And they happen within the site, which is like a canvas, I guess. The site is a square, neutral kind of site with a certain depth, and I'm just exploring organizational ideas that are going to connect directly to my work, and especially the larger work when I need more complex kind of thinking. And out of that came this work. And then the drawings are coming second now, in their drawings that are analytical. And I'm totally aware that these are autonomous things. And someone would have to holler out and talk to me. I don't see myself as an artist, or it doesn't matter. I'm just doing work, and it has to directly to do with my interest in architecture, which have to do with visual organizational ideas, et cetera. And but they are becoming totally autonomous things, clearly, right? And but they're not meant to be. They're just what they are. They're not meant to be art, whatever that means, right? They're just part of a thinking process. But then what's happening? They're being put to use as an architect. So you can see them. I think you have one book here. We published a book of the pieces because there's 30 of them and 30 drawings. But they were developed as organizational ideas, and I'm looking for much more complex, coherent organizations that mimic the city. And so the sections you're looking at, my goal would be they have the complexity of cutting a section across the city. And if you cut a section across every meter over X amount of miles of this downtown, every section would be different. And I'm fascinated with the complexity, the richness, the power of that differentiation that's made out of a collective community and a collective creativity, let's say, that can only happen within the intensity of urbanization. And I would have said that's our greatest creative project. In fact, it's the city. And I'm fascinated with that, and I'm trying to find characteristics that mimic that in some way, that have that quality. But today, we have to do that under a very difficult economic situation in a world that's operated through high capitalism, and that's a whole other conversation, et cetera, that it's a much more kind of complicated kind of thing. But anyway, I'm going to show you. So I have these drawings, and they're going to lead definitely to an idea that connects to an organization, a building. So you look at this, and it's just an image, but it's a plan, or it's whatever you want it to be, and it's going to take me here and a campus in Shenzhen. And now it's going to be kind of a synthesis of going way back to Heiser, that building and land are doing this, and it's hybridized, it's morphology and typology, and the green stuff is building. Everything is used, and it's giving me a very, very different direction. And it's still open for interpretation. This happens to be the right slide. We're one day off. This is yesterday, I guess, right? And there's a direct connection to its usefulness in my work. And then again, I've become more interested, going back to the cyborg self, that architects today have to produce larger and larger scale work, more complex work with less and less time. And as a practitioner now, and again, everything I'm talking about is going to go back and forth between me and my interest more conceptually, isolated from my discipline, and me as a practitioner that has to be more pragmatic of running a studio. And there's going to be a lot of movement back and forth between those two worlds, the pragmatic world and the more conceptual kind of world that's free of all the contingent stuff that we have to deal with as architects. And so again, this is useful to me. This is one of these pieces now that I was showing you, the Strange Networks. And I'm doing a competition for a park in Beijing, and it's 3 by 3 blocks. And it's a cultural park. It has the soccer field and a music hall and a library and blah, blah, blah. I have 6 weeks to do this. And I'll never forget, we started doing this, and I have one of my top people in my office working, and after 3 days, we're just struggling. We're just starting something. And I looked on the wall, and we had this group of pieces on the wall here. I said, hey, that's anything. Why don't you take that one? And it's this one. And it seemed absurd, but actually I'd put 2 years of research on these pieces. We'd worked on it for 2 years. So it wasn't. They were kind of highly organized things they were all interested in chance behavior, because everything there had to do with chance. I'm fascinated with the spontaneity and the type of differentiation that comes out of chance behavior as a creative act. Right, and again, that's going to go all the way back. Right? That's a century, right? And we're looking at this now, and we had 2 weeks to produce kind of an idea for this thing, and it's not my choice. The project I showed you, we spent 2 years on, et cetera, but that's not the way the world works right now. And there's going to be a direct connection now between its organizational ideas and the notion of production of a park. And then something else is going to happen, and this is now 2 years ago. As we keep advancing technology, and we're going back to my cyborg self, we're now scripting. So now I can take each of those pieces and I can look at infinite variation. And infinite is a big number. And so at 100, we can now look at, and now that's going to demand a complete different thinking, because we're looking at these now and we have to decide, why are we choosing number 74 over number 89, understanding that we've got 100 that is a very little number compared to infinity, right? And we're looking at huge amount of a discretionary choice, which is, I would have said, the basis of all art. In the old system, you drew a line. It's exquisite corpse. I think I'm going to show that. Okay, I'll wait. Anyway, we have the huge number of kind of options, and then we used to use it very few options, and now we have these incredible numbers of options, and it's free. It's a program, right? And he's not here today, but Alan that was with me that was working on these drawings. I'm sitting with a character that's got a math brain, and we're writing a program, and this will be what these works are about. And again, this kind of change. And all I'm doing is just following available technology. I'm not inventing it. This is kind of where the world's going, and I'm trying to keep up with it, right? And it's allowing me now to produce these pavilions for a park again in China, and I can look at variations, and these are 3 of them, and I can develop them in a fairly short terms of time, and I can develop something quite complex and quite coherent. And I'm looking at 3 of, kind of, again, a very large number of things. And I've got a tool that's allowing me to use my own intuitive sense, or my own, the development that I've come to in terms of my own work, and to kind of push me. And then I'm going to start these things, and I don't know what to show here. I don't want to really talk about it. I'll come back to that. Funny, slides are very linear. And I'm over COVID, some things changed, and I had some different time, and I was realizing that that the office was taking up a lot of brain space, and I kept thinking I was focusing on design, and Blythe and I were sharing a desk at home, and we were all of a sudden home for a year, and I wanted this kind of different kind of time, and I started sketching again, and I hadn't done that for a long time, and I'll never forget it. Maybe it was 2 weeks. I sat there and just nothing happened. And I realized it was just totally clogged up with my studio. And architecture is a complicated form, and again, the people here that are architects, and it's just loaded with stuff. Just contingency, right? Pragmatic stuff. And it does really affect you. And at that point, I decided to make a change. And in the last 3 or 4 years is where this came from. I've decided to kind of shift my interest again and go back to more conceptual work and kind of rethink who I wanted to be in my creative self. And I've done enough work where I can kind of choose a few things, but I'm kind of focused on something else now that's going to lead to this. But I'm drawing where I draw one form, and then I respond to that, and and I keep developing a direction. I don't know where I'm going. I just keep responding to the thing in front of me and trying to invent something, and I have no idea where I'm going. I'm just intuitively moving something. And I'm doing it very disciplined. I work on a certain paper with one pen, and I have 45 minutes, and then I stop and start the next one. And I did a couple hundred of these, and they were getting me started on some things that we're going to show here. And then I'm going to go back to the work now, and I'm going to go back to my interest in the strange networks. And the DNA matter now is going to change. And I'm understanding that I can control the thing that you're looking at by the system that makes it, and by the elements that I put in that produce it, the DNA structure. So I'm going to produce the DNA structure, and it's going to be somewhat intuitive, although, again, that'd be more complicated. You do know where things are going, and you say you don't, but not true. You only have to do it once, and you do know how it's behaving, not literally, but in a broader direction. But I'm now going to take forms that I've started with that I'm borrowing, and I just observe the world, and it might be graffiti. Wherever I go, I just look at stuff and retranslate it. It goes back to my sketchbooks, because I'm sitting on the beach, and just whatever's in front of me, I just kind of make into something, and then I kind of take that and transform it into something else, and it has its own kind of process having to do that transformation. But now I'm going to make it much more literal under the language we use. And so I can put it now on a computer. I can give it to somebody, right? And I'm going to take that and make it mathematically precise, because one of the hang-ups with the computer, you're kind of stuck with precision. It's only an exact line, right? under those terms, and it's going to be exact, and that's going to make me kind of rethink my little sketch in terms of what it means when I translate them. But I'm going to leave the line that formed them too. The lines on there are the things that formed it, and I'm going to leave you a reference point of how I got to the thing. And I'm now, the stuff here, and again, I didn't even kind of think of this until recently. I've kind of come full circle, and I'm not challenging the painting that I was 20 years ago when I looked at Heiser. I now understand painting is another form, and maybe not the primary form of artistic activity. And again, we could go back to the Heiser. I'm a young person, and I'm in New York, and it's Laurie Anderson. It's CBGB. The world has shifted. Film, of course, it was a highlight of era of film, and everything is discussing the invention of new art forms, which goes right back to the beginning of the 20th century. I'm going back now, and I'm going, okay, it's repositioned painting, but I'm still interested in that condition. And oh, Blythe, who am I talking about? Gerhard Richter. I'm looking at Richter at a show in Paris, the Squeegee. Just mind-boggling paintings, right? I go, oh, okay. Richter has made a career of proving painting is valid, right? And it wasn't as simple as this could be scraped off the earth. And I'm aware that I'm looking at painting, but I'm interested in the cyborg thing again, that if it's seen as a painting, I didn't produce it preconceived. There's never a hand on it. It wasn't delivered by my hand, Pollock. All right? I developed the brain that made the painting. That's being kind of generous, but I'm producing a system that produces an organization that I don't know where it's going. It is true. And I'm giving it DA matter, the information that will be forming it in a very Darwinian sense, organically. And then I'm letting it go, and I'm looking at it, and it's infinite again. And so again, some of the same things I talked about, I have I have a petri dish, and I just made the DNA matter and a method of how they're going to fit together. And then I set it off on the computer, and I come in the morning, and I look at my petri dish, and I've got this thing, and we don't know what it is, right? Is it flora or fauna, right? Is it a living thing, or is it right? Is it a mineral thing? And it's really interesting. You just have to start asking questions. What have I did? But I did do it. And of course, we could go on for a long time. I'm interested in authorship, and that took place when I started my firm. That Morphosis was a collective act, and it wasn't Thom Mayne. And I was already sniffing around, which also came in that era. There were conversations about authorship, right, that were taking place. And I was interested in the questioning the notion of the singularity of the artist was kind of a dead idea, right? That people like certain artists that kind of killed it. And so it's coming back here, and I do look at these and go, it's kind of interesting because I did produce the thinking that made the thing, but I didn't do the thing itself, right? And so it's, for me, just an interesting notion. And then the paint was delivered by, at the moment, state-of-the-art technology that can put on paint three-dimensionally in layers. And so there's 10 layers of this thing that go on it, and we can control it in a certain way, et cetera. And it's only going to be valid for maybe 5 years. A lot of the technology we're using now, it doesn't even make it for a decade. So these things, strangely enough, will be located in a time that they'll be replaced very quick. Like we have models that are all 3D models, and some of them went to the Museum of Modern Art, and I couldn't understand why they want them. It's these generic models, and they were really interesting. They said, oh, no. These won't last 20 years. And 100 years from now, we're going to look at these going, no, these are 1990 to 2000. And guess what? We just got rid of our model maker. And it's got replaced by a complete different machine. It's true. So all of a sudden, we look at our own office and look at these models that are all these white things, go, oh, wow, that's weird. That was a little 15-year kind of piece in our studio. And it'll be the same way with this technology. That, and I'm making decisions whether I don't want the computer to exist. the way I wouldn't want the tool to exist in any of my work. It's invisible, and it has to be suppressed. I have no interest. In fact, the scale of these, we wanted them much bigger, and we're running out of computer power, and I need to hook up with a Caltech or somebody because we've used our biggest computers, because once you see the dot screen, they get ruined. And you go, oh, I get it. Once you understand the process, it totally destroys the thing. And so we're struggling with that right now in terms of kind of the scale and how we can kind of operate at that level. Some obvious things you can now discuss. I can produce this. The triptych on the wall, I've given it a vertical format as the site. I wrote a set of rules. There's 6 DNA pieces in that get repeated. It's 3-dimensional, which I can't tell you. I won't tell you how I did it. So a painter wouldn't do this. They're rotating in space. It comes from an architectural thinking. And they're rotating, so there's no line that's self-similar, like my sketch. And my humanness, it's still there. Hopefully it comes through these, because there's never a mechanical there's never a replication. So even, it's funny, drawing self-similar. In fact, some of Pollock's drawings, I go back now and look at some of them, they're so accurate that he would get along with Stephen Curry. It's muscle memory. It's unbelievable. I'm like, oh, how did he do that? Not the one I showed you. But later on, he got it so mechanical. Like, wait a minute, and then, well, what's her name came along and used the machine, and that made sense, right? And but I'm interested in how does then us as human characters, how does that find its way through technology? Because we are cyborg, and that's not going to change. And of course, in our world, quote, the art world, it's minor compared to how it's affecting us politically and culturally. In other words, this is just a little taste of kind of opportunities or what things that we're going to deal with as we deal more and more with the nature of with the digital world and with AI, of course. There's going to be kind of questions of kind of who we are. What are we going to do, by the way? And it's going to affect kind of the simpler tasks first. And it's going to be probably an enormous political problem is what it's going to be, as well as a cultural problem. And I'm interested in, again, an art form that's somehow interested in shaping society. I was just reading a little piece of Herbie Hancock recently talking about an early concert he did with Miles Davis, and he played the wrong chord on the piano, and he freaked out. And then Davis stopped immediately and shifted the notion and fixed it. And of course, musicians, like comedians, it's maybe the highest form of creativity because it has to operate with time, and it's nanosecond, right? And it happens that quickly. And then he was discussing how important that was, and it was going back to and just all I have about chance, that it's a lesson in life. And I'm interested in these pieces that I can only make mistakes and respond to that mistake through a system that now makes the next line that revises that thing. And to me, it's a lesson of life. It's how you go through life. You don't have control of a fixed system, and that's why all religious systems are debunked, because they demand some fixed notion, which is absurd, because we live in a life that we have no clue what's going to happen. And if anything, to be a modern person, you have to live with chance and changeability and flexibility and alertness. But if students ask me for advice, I have no idea. I just say, just be alert, kind of watch the world and be open to change. If you can't do that, wrong profession for sure, right? And again, just in my little talk here, in my lifespan, it's been kind of fascinating that the whole notion of what architecture has changed and how we make architecture, and even the kind of the type of brain function you need that's going to work. It's a little different than it was when I started. That the math stuff kind of helps a little bit, and your kind of left-right the proportions have kind of changed a bit, I think, in terms of kind of what it means to be a serious architect. One last thing, kind of literal. We're working on a certain level, and it's completely abstract, and we just started to shift that. And we realized by changing, which is obvious, by changing the DNA and giving it some purposeful figurative notion, that I can make something that has a different connection to its viewer. And again, I'm interested in, was it Ballard or was it Baudrillard? The notion that the viewer brings something to the work, and it has to be open and flexible and not fixed. And so you understand that the work is going to be always interpreted in different terms, but by giving it some figuration, it allows somebody an entry point. And so the one behind you is that, and it's a landscape. And we had a show 6 months ago, and we had a couple pieces in it, and it was all about landscape. And Hockney was there, and it was a Hockney drawing of a flower vase. And I thought it was really fascinating because he's an amazing kind of painter, but he's kind of painting a flower vase on kind of at least in my generation, it's kind of really old school and kind of a nice painting, but it's this flower vase. I'm interested in, I'm not looking at a forest. I made the forest. That's my forest, and it's not working yet. So I got a project still, because it needs to be a little spookier and it needs to have different kind of sensibility to it. But I'm going to build the forest. And I think that's kind of where we are in the world today. We're so, like nature, as an architect, nature disappeared, when was this now? 30 years ago? That we understand now there's no such thing as a God-formed nature, that whatever nature used to be, we form nature. It's a man-made construct, right? And it had a huge effect on architecture that led to the building I showed you, right? We literally construct nature. And it's no longer is nature scary to mankind. Mankind is dominating. It's reversed around. And so we are in our landscapes, in our production, our work, we have a huge kind of power of kind of interpreting what that is. And we have a choice of making that, and then hopefully it says something that's useful to us. And then with that, it has some human emotional content that somehow speaks to you, that again, that humanness finds its way through the work. That's kind of it.